Rogers TV, Durham Region. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hey, what's good, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Players Corner with Karim Grant. I'm your host, Karim Grant. Today we have another special guest in studio. We have none other than the 2001 Grey Cup champion, Kamau Peterson. He is also the 2008 Most Outstanding Canadian. So, Kamau, welcome. Thanks for being here, brother.
Appreciate having me.
Oh, thanks for coming through. I really appreciate you being here, man. So, you're Canadian, but you're American, but you're Canadian. Explain that. How does that work?
Honestly, I'm Canadian by, way of training for this game. Like, my first football was played in Windsor, Ontario, where I was in high school, but I'd lived in Detroit my whole upbringing. So, I didn't start playing football till my senior year. So they went by my first training. Then I went away to school at University of New Hampshire and didn't even realize that the CFL was really a thing. And ironically enough, Paul Lapalisse called me. Yeah. And was like, you're about to be up for the draft. Why don't you come down to the combine? That's where I met you there. We were same year. But honestly, I wasn't going to go. I was prepping for, I was getting NFL. My pro day ready. Because
you were killing it at UNH, right?
Yeah, I did well, at least my last year. Got into some trouble like young guys do my first couple of years. So I got lucky and got a coaching change at my position and was able to put up some numbers towards the end and give myself an opportunity. And
did the NFL come calling it?
Yeah, I was able to I had two options. I had free agent at Tampa Bay, which I took right off the bat, and then I had a chance to let them know, Tony Dungy at the time, I was trying to get some signing bonus money.
You look like Tony Dungy a little bit. Anybody ever tell you
never.
that?
Never. That's the first time ever, and I hope it never happens again. But I was trying to, signing bonus are only real money.
Right.
And I, talking to Tony, trying to figure out why I wasn't getting offered any, just hadn't caught enough balls. I said, well, look, I just got drafted by Calgary. What happened? Should I just go play over there? He's like, oh yeah, go play. We'll come get you, in a couple of years. And sure enough, he wasn't able to. He was, entrenched in Indy at the time once I came out 2 years later. But he passed me off to Herm Edwards, who was like his understudy in Tampa. And I went to New York and was able to, spend some time there in New York andRy and come back through the league. And
how was that experience, just being in the NFL?
Honestly, it was for me, it was underwhelming, in the sense that you grow up thinking that's the absolute pinnacle and you're going to get there and everybody's going to be untouchable and you're really going to test yourself. And man, I got open. I had more trouble getting open in the CFL than I did in the NFL.
Is that right?
Now, facts are facts. I wasn't there long.
I guess everybody's experience is different, right?
But you know what it is? I found out, much later, obviously, in figuring it out, coaching and whatnot, on the edges. Yeah. It's the same game.
That's right.
If anything, the CFL is more physical.
So when you say the edges, let's explain.
I mean the receivers and DBs, right? The defensive backs and receivers, including the slots and in the wideouts, it's the same game. Where the games are very different and where the NFL really is heavily weighted over the CFL is in the box. The line play and the backers versus running backs.
That's right.
It's a very different game because the width of the field changes the dynamic of who plays it. But in the outsides, you can run. If anything, the CFL is more physical out on the edges because we can jam all the way down the field.
That's right. That's right. You know what? You explained that so eloquently because I've always asked former players who've done both, what's the major difference? And you really pinpointed the difference there, and I really appreciate that. Because I remember being in the NFL, when I was playing for Atlanta, I felt like you said, it's a little bit underwhelming. I'm like, yo, isn't this supposed to be like monsters? I felt like I was supposed to be in an episode of Space Jam with the football edition. And I'd be playing against some monsters, and I'd be some short little Canadian. I went down there and I felt like, yo, I really belong. And if not, I'm better than some of these guys. Did you feel like that at some point?
Yeah, no, and it was, I was fortunate enough to, I went to New York first, had all my mini camps there and got into trouble there, 20-something dumb stuff. Yeah. Was fortunate enough to get traded to Green Bay, but talking about the day before training camp started. So now I'm the 15th receiver the day before camp. was able to move up to the third receiver by the time preseason stopped.
Yeah.
And and that wasn't by accident. It's partly injuries, guys go down, but also you got capitalized on opportunities, and I was able to do that.
Yeah.
Once I realized I belonged, I just took off.
Right.
But ultimately, theirs is a different dynamic financially, right? They've invested so much in draft picks, invested so much in their free agents. They'll tell you flat out, we didn't bring you here to make this team.
That's right.
And that's what I mean by underwhelming, and it was a bit disheartening, because you grow up thinking that, if I beat everybody out, I'm going to be here, and this is the top level, and politics make their way into every form of sport when there's money involved.
Oh, for sure.
And that was my awakening to that. And they tell you not to take it personally. I took it personally, so I stopped answering calls from that league at that time. And I said I'll just go back in Canada.
Wow.
I had more fun playing in Canada anyway.
Yeah.
As a receiver, it's really fun to play in the Canadian game.
Yeah. So this opportunity happened after your 2001 year?
Yeah, this was 02-03. So
Okay.
you sign that CFL deal. They lock you into a bit of an option year, and then you have a small window with which you can jump.
Right.
And as myself and probably 8 or 9 guys that year, we all did our workouts together. Arlen Bruce, Derek Armstrong, Charles Roberts. Like, there was a few of us that we would see at every workout.
Right.
And then we all signed off to different teams, and some made it and some didn't. Some ended up coming back, and that's how that went. But that's how you exercise your option. You're right around February, right around Valentine's Day, everybody just kind of dips into a bunch of workouts, and that's where I landed.
And I think for me, the biggest thing about the CFL, and I'd always tell myself this, I was just like, okay, I'm playing against these guys who are here right now, and they're here for a reason. Whether they played in the NFL or wherever beforehand, I've realized that if you're here and I'm here, there's no difference.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we're here for the same goal, so you can't say you're better than me. So why aren't you in that league if you're better? It's so much better than me.
Right.
So everybody's here for a reason. Now let's go and let's make something happen, right?
Yeah. No, there's a lot to that, especially with the different passports. And the more I've played and been around the game on both sides, as a PA rep for 10 years and these things, you start to really see those differences. A lot of those Americans are here, obviously not by choice.
Yeah.
But there's a system there with once they get to their pension year, they really do a clean house over there. You can get blacklisted right off the bat. You're going third year, going into fourth year. A lot of those guys, if you check their year, they're going into their fourth year, trying to get back when the league won't accept them back, because that's when you got to pay out their pension.
That's right.
Right. So the guys that make it to their fourth year, they hang on to them like grim death.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas here we got these Canadians, and the top 210 Canadians are going to play regardless of age, right? So they're constantly recycling these Canadians to get the best talent to be able to compete with these Americans.
That's
That's why they say the team with the best Canadians wins.
Yeah.
Because ultimately they'll find good Americans everywhere.
There's so many of them,
That's
right? You got 40 million in New York alone, right?
Exactly.
So I mean, it's not hard to find. Going back to your first year, you end up getting drafted to Calgary.
Yep.
And end up winning a Grey Cup. How was that experience?
That was, honestly, I took it for granted. I'm
You have to.
20,
I mean, you're
I think I was like 21, young. Something like that at the time. I thought it was all going to be like that. It was a crazy year just because it's your introduction into pro sports. I went from a 8-game season at New Hampshire. We weren't making the playoffs back then. We were the upstart team that, later ended up being a good team. Go from 8 games to 18 plus 2 preseason plus playoffs.
Right.
And I played in all of them.
Yeah.
Every snap in all of them. So I hit the wall
you got
twice.
Them young legs.
Oh man, I hit the wall twice. Young legs. Man, it was rough for me physically, and obviously the transition into, and we'll talk about it. I really feel like the jump from collegiate football to, especially at the U sport level, not that I was, but I felt the jump going into grown men, dealing with grown man strength, jamming you all the way down the line and all the way up the field. At the defensive back, I struggled with that a little bit. I was fast and could jump out the gym, but wasn't used to people getting hands on me.
Did y'all have the field turf at that point?
Man,
I think it was
came
still
in
the carpet,
that league.
right?
Yeah, it was field turf, except for Edmonton was the only grass field.
Yeah.
Everybody else had field turf, and not all of it good turf.
No.
Oh man, like I thank goodness they got rid of a lot of that, because it was just so treacherous on the body.
Yeah.
But honestly, we're talking AstroTurf though, not field turf. Like what they have now is, I believe.
So you played on your first year was AstroTurf.
My first 3 years, I believe, or 2 years were AstroTurf at least.
Crazy.
And you're talking about guys are losing whole sides of skin off of it.
It was crazy. We had all the tape on our elbows.
The tape wasn't doing nothing. It was shirts and just neoprene sleeves everywhere.
You know what used to kill me? The showers after the game.
Oh my God.
You sit in the shower, you're like, I forgot about that one. It's
oh man, and you remember like old Ivor Wynn Stadium.
Yeah.
Don't
tell me about
hot
it.
water ain't working in that shower, and you get to what was then the Sky Dome. They rolling out the field. You're watching them roll out the field in sections over top of the baseball field, knowing that there's seams 5, 6, 7 inches that you're gonna be running comebacks right into.
And below that, it's just concrete.
Just concrete. But I also, I played arena ball in between. Like, I was one of those guys, you remember at that time,
right.
Arena League was just getting big, and they were paying pretty good over there, and I always said I wasn't going to play for very long anyway. I wanted to maximize my time, so I was playing year-round.
Yeah.
So I'd go from CFL to arena, CFL to NFL to arena to,
So you're getting that good scratch.
I was trying. I was doing the best I could, but yeah, I was playing, and they were rolling out the turf right on top of an ice rink.
Yeah.
Like actual ice with just carpet over top.
I remember trying out for a New York team, and I'm like, are you guys serious?
You want us to play on this? Oh man, you take
crazy.
2 steps out of the dig, and I'm over the boards.
Yeah, it was.
It was crazy.
It was insane.
I try to tell my kids what we went through, and they're just like, why would you ever?
Yeah.
It's different.
So going through all that early in your career, playing from league to league, winning the Grey Cup, which you obviously at that young age you take for granted. Do you feel that was a culmination of the award you received in 2008 when you were the most outstanding Canadian? I
felt like that was more of a reckoning because I went through some down times too. Like it wasn't all up. Like 2001 we won. I got to be a big part of that. I started from the beginning. I was able to be a starter and a ratio breaker. I played American positions, so I didn't quite understand the value I had even then until I came back. But I thought it was going to be like that every year. Yeah. We didn't make the playoffs again until 2008. So I went several years on bad teams with, with all that comes with that. But it builds you differently.
Right.
I had some lows in places like Winnipeg and Hamilton. Hamilton's a tough place to play.
Very tough. Very difficult.
And it's difficult.
Well, shout out Hamilton. I'm sorry.
Shout out to Hamilton. No question.
Hamilton's a great city. Shout out to you guys.
I enjoyed my
drafted
time.
me. I love you guys.
I enjoyed my time there, but it is a tough place to play.
Yeah.
At least it was then, especially with those Ivor Wynn days. It was difficult, but those lows build you back up. So for me, when I was able to hit Edmonton in 07, 08, start playing with guys like Ricky Ray and Jason Tucker and those guys, and at that time, this is pre-salary cap, you got a locker room full of vets, 30-year-olds, 29-year-olds, all that have been doing it.
Yeah.
And it's a different culture when you've got that kind of vet leadership, and that was great for my career in terms of just being around that and seeing how it should be done, because I've been around so much of how it shouldn't that I really didn't know which way was up, truly.
Absolutely.
So I got some good mentorship there and was able to pass that on, and that kind of springboarded me into what I do now and what I've been doing since.
Yeah, so you received that award. Were you ever able to get close back to the Grey Cup game?
08 was the closest. We went as an Eastern Conference crossover from Edmonton. We ended up losing in Montreal. So we beat Winnipeg in the quarter, lost to Montreal in the Oval in Montreal, which nobody ever wins in there, obviously, but lost there in a close one, and that would have put us in the Grey Cup as an Eastern team. So I believe we were the first crossover team to ever actually get a playoff win, but it didn't matter. You wasn't in the game, it didn't matter.
Yeah. But I think going through all those things kind of galvanizes your spirit and makes you understand and appreciate the hardships it takes, because it builds character, right?
It does, especially when you haven't been in it. Like for a guy like me that had been 7 years, without it, I was playing, scrapping and clawing, and for the people that have a chance to go in every year, I was always jealous of those guys, the strong, dominant teams that are in every year. Man, I was like, man, what must that be like? Yeah,
so we're going to talk a bit more about how this hardship builds character and your transition into your new phase of your life when we come back from commercials. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Players Corner with Karim Grant. I appreciate you guys turning in. We're with Kamau Peterson, and we'll be back in a couple minutes.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
This is when the fun starts.
All right, let's get started.
You would need to let me take over.
Whoa, Nelly.
done.
Welcome to season 2 of Canada's Drag Race!
I can see things that your people can't.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the Players Corner with your host, Karim Grant. We are in studio with Kamau Peterson, the Grey Cup champion and 2008 Most Outstanding Canadian. So, Kamau, we were talking a little bit about your time in the CFL and, you get into the Grey Cup but not being able to get back to that level again. And your career ended what year?
My last year was 2011.
2011. When your career ended, was it time? Did you know it was time?
Yeah, I only went back. I tore my Achilles in 2009.
Right.
And then, partially tore it in 2009 and then fully ruptured it in 2010. Got misdiagnosed, played on it for a year, you know how that goes. But then when it did rupture, I wanted to go back on my own terms. So I wanted to come back from it, see if I could retain any semblance of that level. Obviously, the team I was with, Edmonton, released me, and BC picked me up after 6 months of rehab.
Right.
And I just wanted to go out on my own terms. So few of us get to go out when we want to go out.
Right.
And I was determined to do that and was able to.
Right.
So I was able to walk out on my own. I was asked to stick around. I left right before the vet cut day in BC. And they ended up winning the Grey Cup that year. So I could have won a ring that year if I would have stuck around and taken a back seat to some younger players.
Right.
The competitor in me wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
That was really the conversation. It was like, listen, listen, we got some young guys that we want you to mentor, but you're no longer going to be able to compete as a starter.
Wow.
And I was like, so even if I'm better than these guys, I can't play. No, we're going to let those guys play.
Yeah.
And I understand it, but it just wasn't me.
Yeah.
I had started every game.
Yeah.
Since I came in the league, I just wasn't built to back up at that time. And it wasn't so much about backing up. It wasn't the role. It was that I was no longer being permitted to compete.
Right.
That I couldn't abide.
Yeah.
So I'd rather, for me, I was ready to go get on with my life. But I had my fill.
Yeah.
Like, I've done everything you can do.
So you're a coach now. So just fast forwarding a little bit, and we're going to go back and forth. Are you prepared to have that conversation with young players?
I have it all the time.
Right.
And honestly, I told myself I was reluctant to get into coaching because in my experience with coaching tends to be a lot of let's tell him whatever we need to get him in a position where we can manipulate him, and that athlete becomes a chess piece. I didn't want to be that, and I wouldn't coach in that space. So I was determined to tell these athletes the truth, whether they wanted to hear it or not. And that was one of my stipulations for even entering coaching. I had a bunch of different schools that wanted me to come coach with them after Team Canada and the success we had there. And I had been training athletes, so I've been telling them the truth. I was just going to keep it the same.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Not a lot of athletes are ready to hear that. And I don't mind telling them because this game, our game, is not for everybody.
No, it's not.
And I don't mind. I tell them right out the bat, this one, you may want to rethink this one.
And I always tell my players, I would say, listen, you can love this game, but it doesn't love you back.
Oh, man.
It's like a terrible girlfriend that you fall in love with that doesn't love you.
Yep, and that happens a lot. You see a lot with bodies start breaking down. Right? The kid wants it. He goes hard for it. He digs for it. He's driven, but his body keeps breaking down. And that's the thing. It's a perfect storm, and the combination of things have to go your way to really excel in this game.
Yeah.
I got really lucky injury-wise. That Achilles was the first thing I ever had. I never really had major, other than some broken ribs, broken fingers, things like that you can play through. But hamstring here, but nothing major. That was the first surgery. You got guys playing 7, 8, 10, 13 surgeries.
Yeah.
So that love is crazy for them.
So 2011, your ego's a bit bruised now. You've been told that you're not going to compete for a starting position. You decide to quit. When did you know that was your final decision? Like, this is your final answer? And how did you feel?
I felt like I knew I had lost a step. I'm 6 months off of rehab. I know what I was before and the form I had. I didn't know if I had the energy to get back to that form, and I certainly wasn't going to fight to do it and go traveling all across the country, dragging my young family at that time around as well. Also, it wasn't the first time I've been told no. It wasn't my first time getting cut or having that option. I actually respected the fact that they gave me the option. Right. In Edmonton, when I got hurt, they were like, we're done.
Yeah.
Green Bay, we're done, whether you like it or not. You know what I'm saying? New York, we're trading you. So I had a bit more experience being told no, which can be difficult when you've been, cherished as we have as athletes at a high level for so long. So the ego bruising wasn't the big thing. For me, it was a matter of have I had my fill.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of us struggle with leaving the game is, if you get pushed out of the game before, if it's done with you before you're done with it, that can be a difficult thing to satiate. For me, that wasn't a problem.
Right. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of us have families, and they play a big part in our decision making. You said you have a young family at the time, and you had to make that decision that, I'm not dragging these guys around. And I had to make that decision too for the betterment of my sons and my daughters. And I was just like, listen, I got to do something better because I don't want them to have an absentee father. You know what I mean? And now your kids are doing really well in the sport and probably going to play at a high level, right?
Hopefully. Well, I mean, I'm actually hoping they choose golf, but it seems a bit too boring for them right now. But yeah, they're picking up the game. They play different sports every season, but they've got some talent in it for sure.
Nice. So you ended up at York University. How did that happen?
Honestly, I chose York for the potential impact.
Wow.
I got into coaching, the X's and O's, I both
chose York. Nobody chooses York.
I chose York.
Shout out to York, though.
Yeah, I chose York over a few other school options because of where it's situated.
Yeah.
I thought at the very least, the walk-in traffic alone, being right there at Jane and Finch, I want to impact these lives, these young black men that need this type of mentor and figure. And for me, it was never really about the game. The game, teaches you so much more about life, but being able to fill in those gaps and lines in their lives, that was the biggest thing for me. And that's always, once it wasn't that's when I stepped away.
That's incredible. I mean, it's a question I've always wanted to ask you because it's like, York was always a school that, recruited me coming up, and I was like, man, I don't want to stay home and go to York, and they weren't winning. And I feel like there's a definite culture shift since you've been there in the last couple of years. How do you incorporate a new mind state when you come to an organization or to a new team? Like, how does that work for you?
I mean, for me, I approach it like I would imagine anybody who's passionate about anything would, right? You want to sell yourself. I wasn't selling the school. I was selling me, and everybody I recruited that came there will tell you they came there for me, and the relationship I could build with them and what they could learn from me and what I would pour into them, and that's exactly what I was doing. I was pouring everything I could and knew and picked up into these athletes, and that if I had to sell, that was it. And it was also sitting across from their mothers and family saying, look, I'm gonna take care of him like he's my own, which was also true. So I didn't have to lie to anybody. Like I said, I wasn't getting into coaching lying to anybody, and I won't get back into coaching lying to anybody. So in the time since York, where I've been fielding offers from schools and CFL teams and NCAA teams, it's the same thing. It's got to be the right fit, and those organizations that are into that, I can't be a part of.
Right. The state of Canadian football, not just Canadian football professionally, but university football. Where are we at right now?
I don't think we're nearly where we could be. We're better than we have been, though. I think it's completely understated, the growth in the game at the local level, at the regional level. It's much talked about how so many Canadians have gone south and done well, right? This was a record year in the NFL draft for Canadian players, but they all had to leave to go get that exposure. They need to do a lot more regionally and locally here to build the game. It's taken a huge hit both with COVID and concussions over the last decade. In certain regions, it's a dying game that needs some revitalization, and I'm trying to, be a big part of that. But from a skill building standpoint and understanding between the youth sport level and the CFL level, I really think there needs to be a much bigger bridge built to better prepare our collegiate players, Canadian collegiate players at the youth sport level, to the league that is the only professional league that I know of that houses half of its roster spots for them. That's not talked about nearly enough. Like, that should be a goal for kids coming up in youth football. It's the best summer job I could ever think of. And there's 215 spots sitting there ready for these kids. Nobody talks about it. Nobody speaks about how to prep them for that. And I don't know that some schools do a great job, don't get me wrong, but not every school of the 27 playing football are doing a great job prepping these kids for the role they're actually going to play on these teams. Because so many of my athletes that I work with, they'll come back after their experience and exposure to that league and be like, it's not at all what I thought.
Right.
And then it's a whole new counseling session is, okay, this is what it's actually going to be and what they're actually expecting from you. So this is how you actually have to prepare. So it's back to square one for them, and that's not a developmental league, as you know.
No, it's not.
They expect you to come in there a finished product.
Be ready. You got to be ready and stay ready. You know, and it's a conversation I have with some of my athletes, just in terms of understanding that it's not just about physicality. It's not just about the game. There's a game within the game.
Man.
And there's a game outside the game that you have to understand.
So many in games.
And so explaining that to young, men and women who are playing this game right now, what's the, a couple of the biggest pieces of advice you can give them? Like, we're based in Durham right now, and we got, big schools like Dwyer and Donald A. Wilson that have churned out some really great football players. But what can you tell them to get them to the next level?
The challenge is twofold to me, especially at the skill position. That's where I focus, is the skill position. So we're talking DBs and receivers. That's who I work with, mainly because that's what I know and that's what I studied. But the biggest thing is getting them to understand that no matter how skilled they think they are and how easy it is for them to have success at the level they're at, whatever level they're at in Canada. I don't care if you're a 4-time All-Canadian like your son was. I have the same conversation with him. The level that you're going to has a level of skill that you have not yet even seen, let alone been able to prepare for. And that is going to hit you hard. Not to mention you're battling stigmas, right? There is a stigma with the Canadian player that is rooted in some truth to a degree.
There is some truth to
right?
it.
There's a history. This league is older. The CFL is older than the NFL. They've had years of watching Canadians play. And there's been anomalies like myself who have broken the ratio and played American positions, which are the positions that we all play over here and get balls targeted. And they think they're going in and getting those positions. I was a 4-time All-Canadian. You should be throwing me the ball. Well, the guy that's playing that position went to Alabama and was 3-time, 3 years at Texas or whatever.
It's culturally embedded within them since they were like 4 or 5 years old. A lot of our guys picked up the sport when they're in like grade 9, grade 10.
And they've been dominant since then.
You know what I mean? And they're used to the dominance. So now you've made the foray into coaching. You're also doing some training as well?
Yeah, I jumped back into the private sector after I left York and just didn't want to, but as usual, the market kind of dictates what the needs are. I had 30 guys once I left York that needed me to get them. We weren't done. They either transitioning to the pros or they'd come there to train with me to get to that position or whatever, knocking on my door. So I jumped back and forayed into that, started a company called Athletic Paradigm.
Nice.
And we're starting with football, but we do speed training for multiple sports. But the skill is where I really focus with the receivers and defensive backs, and that's where I've been building. We had a couple go in the draft this year over COVID. I started right before COVID hit. And so I was able to work with those players throughout COVID so they could still stay sharp and pour a lot of that into it. And especially with the inception of the online training, those modules started taking off, so it's become a lot easier for me to reach bigger numbers and get nationally and internationally even.
That's great, man. I really appreciate you coming in. I know you're a busy guy and taking some time and chop it up. We go way back. I think it's 20 years this year. 20 years this year that we first got drafted into the league, and it's great to see that you're affecting change in so many different lives, and I really appreciate that. We just want to thank Kamau Peterson for coming in today and chopping it up with us. This, once again, is the Players Corner with Karim Grant. I want to shout out Ghost Label for the dope gear he's given me throughout this entire season. Appreciate you, and we hope to see you guys soon on our next episode of the Players Corner with Karim Grant.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Think it's okay to drive high? Think again. Drug-impaired driving is as illegal as drunk driving, and in Ontario, the penalties are the same. If police suspect you're driving under the influence of drugs of any kind, or a combination of drugs and alcohol, and you fail a roadside test, your license will be suspended immediately for up to 30 days. You'll pay a penalty of $198. And you can be charged with a criminal offense of impaired driving, the same as alcohol. Driving high is never okay.